Welcome to the True Love 40. What would you do if the stranger you kissed to save their life turned out to be worth $14 billion? A paramedic on a rainy Chicago night finds a woman with no pulse on a sidewalk, breathes life back into her lungs, and discovers she is the most powerful and secretive billionaire heiress in the country. But saving her life was only the beginning, because someone powerful wanted her dead, and now he is the only one standing between her and the man trying to destroy her. This is a story of impossible love, deadly secrets, and a kiss that changed two lives forever. Stay till the end because the twist in this story will leave you speechless. The woman lying face down on the rain-soaked pavement had no pulse. Ryan Carter, a 25-year-old paramedic finishing the last hour of his graveyard shift, dropped to his knees beside her crumpled body, pressed two fingers to her neck, and felt nothing, not a flutter, not a whisper of life. Her lips were turning blue. Her long, silky black hair was fanned across the asphalt like spilled ink, and her designer dress, something Ryan couldn't name but knew cost more than his entire apartment, was torn at the shoulder. A thin ribbon of blood traced down her temple. She was breathtakingly beautiful, even on the edge of death, with fair porcelain skin and delicate features that looked almost sculpted. But beauty doesn't matter when you have less than 4 minutes before brain damage becomes permanent. Ryan tilted her head back, sealed his mouth over hers, and breathed. 1 breath. 2 breaths. Then 30 compressions, his palms stacked over her sternum, pressing hard enough to crack ribs if he had to. The rain hammered down on both of them. His ambulance partner, Diego, was 3 blocks away responding to a fender bender. Ryan was alone. "Come on," he muttered through gritted teeth, locking his elbows. "Come on, don't you dare die on me." He bent down again, gave 2 more rescue breaths, tasting rain and something faintly sweet, expensive lipstick, maybe, and kept pushing. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. His arms burned. His knees ached against the concrete. 45 seconds passed. A minute. 90 seconds of nothing. Then she gasped. Her body jerked violently beneath his hands. Her eyes flew open, stunning, almost unnaturally vivid green eyes, and she grabbed his collar with a grip that was shockingly strong for someone who had been clinically dead moments ago. She stared at him with wild, disoriented terror, and for one frozen heartbeat, their faces were inches apart, his breath still warm on her lips. "You're okay," Ryan said softly, steadily, even though his own heart was jackhammering. "You're okay. My name is Ryan. I'm a paramedic." "You stopped breathing. I need you to stay still." She didn't stay still. She tried to sit up, winced, and clutched her ribs. Where is he?" she whispered, her voice ragged with fear. "Where is who?" But her eyes rolled back and she went limp again, collapsing against his chest. Ryan caught her, cradling her head, and radioed dispatch with one hand while holding her with the other. The ambulance arrived 4 minutes later. They loaded her onto the stretcher, and under the harsh fluorescent lights of the rig, Ryan noticed details he'd missed in the dark: a Cartier watch on her wrist, diamond studs in her ears, and a thin, barely visible scar running along her collarbone, old and deliberate, like someone had put it there on purpose. He also noticed something else. Despite her flawless skin and the kind of figure that belonged on magazine covers, there were faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the subtlest softening along her jaw. This woman wasn't in her 20s, as he'd first assumed. She was older. Possibly much older. And whoever or whatever had put her on that sidewalk with no pulse, it wasn't an accident. At Mercy General Hospital, the truth arrived before the woman even regained consciousness. It arrived in the form of 6 men in black suits who stormed through the emergency department like a private army, flashing credentials and demanding to see the patient. It arrived in the form of a helicopter landing on the rooftop helipad at 2 in the morning. And it arrived in the form of a name that made every nurse at the station stop and stare. Victoria Ashford. Ryan recognized the name immediately. Everyone in the country did. Victoria Ashford, sole heir to the Ashford Empire, a dynasty that controlled the largest pharmaceutical conglomerate in North America, with holdings in real estate, tech, and private banking that pushed their net worth past $14 billion. Victoria herself had been CEO for the past 12 years, ever since her father's death, and she was famously reclusive, rarely photographed, and almost mythically private. The tabloids called her the Ghost Billionaire. She was 48 years old, though looking at her now, lying still and pale in the hospital bed with monitors beeping softly around her, Ryan would have guessed 35 at most. And he had just given her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on a dirty sidewalk in downtown Chicago. Now pause for a second. A paramedic making $42,000 a year just unknowingly kissed a woman worth $14 billion to save her life. But here's what makes this story truly insane: that kiss is going to change both of their lives forever, and not in the way you think. If you want to see what happens next, hit that like button right now and keep watching, because this is only the beginning. You need to leave, one of the suited men told Ryan flatly, stepping between him and the hospital bed. This is now a private security matter. I'm her attending paramedic, Ryan said, not moving. I perform CPR and rescue breathing. I need to complete my patient report, and I need to brief the ER physician on the circumstances of. You need to leave, the man repeated, and this time he put a hand on Ryan's chest. Ryan looked down at the hand. He looked up at the man. Ryan was 6'1", lean but visibly muscular beneath his uniform, with the kind of jawline and easy confidence that made people underestimate how stubborn he could actually be. He smiled, the kind of smile that was more warning than warmth. Touch me again and I'll file an assault report, and then a reporter I know at the Tribune will find out that Victoria Ashford was found unconscious on a public street with signs of possible foul play, and your little blackout operation here becomes front-page news. He paused. Your call, suit. The hand dropped. Ryan filed his report, briefed the ER doctor, and went home at dawn to his tiny studio apartment above a laundromat on the south side. He showered, ate cold leftover pasta standing over the sink, and tried to sleep. But he couldn't stop thinking about her eyes, that flash of vivid green, the terror in them, and the question she'd asked before losing consciousness again. Where is he? Someone had hurt her. Someone had left her to die. And for reasons Ryan couldn't fully explain, that thought made his blood simmer with a quiet, protective anger that he hadn't felt in a very long time. He told himself to let it go. She was a billionaire. She had a private army. She didn't need a paramedic from the south side worrying about her. He told himself this repeatedly for 3 days, and he almost believed it until Victoria Ashford walked into the fire station where he was pulling a double shift and changed everything. She looked entirely different standing upright. The hospital pallor was gone, replaced by a quiet radiance that made the fluorescent lights of Station 47 seem suddenly inadequate. She wore a simple white blouse, dark tailored pants, and her long black hair was pulled back in a loose knot that somehow looked both effortless and elegant. No entourage this time. No suits. Just her, standing in the doorway of the break room where Ryan was mid-bite into a sandwich, looking at him with those impossible green eyes. You're Ryan Carter, she said. It wasn't a question. Ryan set down his sandwich, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and leaned back in his chair. And you're Victoria Ashford. Or as the tabloids call you, the Ghost Billionaire. Though I have to say, for a ghost, you look very corporeal. The faintest flicker of amusement crossed her face. I came to thank you. You saved my life. Just doing my job. Your job ended when you filed your report. You also threatened my head of security with media exposure to stay by my bedside. That goes somewhat beyond the standard paramedic job description. Ryan studied her. Up close, she was even more striking: high cheekbones, full lips, a quiet intensity in her expression that suggested a mind constantly working behind those eyes. She carried herself with the kind of composure that came from decades of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions, but there was something underneath it, something fragile she was working very hard to hide. "You asked me a question that night," Ryan said, his voice dropping lower. "When you first woke up. You grabbed my collar and asked, 'Where is he?' Who were you talking about?" The composure cracked. Just for a second, a tightening around her eyes, a slight catch in her breath, but Ryan saw it, and she knew he saw it, and something unspoken passed between them. "That's not why I'm here," she said quietly. "Maybe it should be." Silence stretched between them. The break room clock ticked. Somewhere in the station, someone laughed at a TV show. Victoria Ashford, a woman who controlled a $14 billion empire, stood before a 25-year-old paramedic and, for just a moment, looked utterly lost. "I'd like to repay you," she said finally, straightening. "Name your price." "Anything." Ryan stood up slowly, and the height difference became apparent. He had a good 5 inches on her, and he used them, not to intimidate but to close the distance just enough to make the conversation feel intimate. "Dinner," he said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "You said anything." "I want dinner. With you. Somewhere without bodyguards." "Mr. Carter." "Ryan. Ryan." She said his name like she was testing it, tasting it. "I'm 48 years old." "I know. You're 25. Also aware. Math has always been a strong suit. This is absurd. You said anything." He grinned, that sharp, disarming grin that had gotten him both into and out of trouble his entire life. Unless a billionaire's word doesn't mean what it used to. She stared at him for a long, charged moment. And then, against what appeared to be her better judgment, Victoria Ashford laughed. It was a real laugh, unguarded and warm, and it transformed her entire face, made her look younger, lighter, almost girlish. Ryan felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with medical science. "Friday," she said. 8 o'clock. "I'll send a car." "I'll drive myself." "Just send me the address." "You're very stubborn. You have no idea." She left, and Ryan stood in the break room for a full minute, staring at the doorway she'd walked through, before Diego appeared behind him and said, "Brother, was that who I think it was?" "Probably." "And did you just ask a billionaire on a date?" "Technically, she offered to repay me and I chose the currency." Diego whistled low. "You're either the bravest man alive or the dumbest." Ryan picked up his sandwich. "History will decide." Friday arrived, and Ryan drove his 10-year-old Honda Civic to the address Victoria had texted him, which turned out to be not a restaurant, but a private estate on the North Shore, a sprawling lakefront property hidden behind iron gates and old-growth trees. A housekeeper led him through a foyer larger than his entire apartment building to a candlelit terrace overlooking Lake Michigan, where Victoria was waiting in a dark emerald dress that matched her eyes. The table was set for 2. A private chef was preparing dinner in the kitchen. The night air smelled of jasmine and possibility. "You look incredible," Ryan said, and he meant it without pretense. "You look surprised," she replied. "I look underdressed." "There's a difference." He glanced down at his best button-up shirt, the one without wrinkles, and his cleanest jeans. "You could have warned me this was a formal affair." "I would have worn my other pair of jeans." That laugh again. Warm. Unguarded. Dangerous. They ate. They talked. And what started as polite conversation quickly became something else entirely. Victoria was brilliant, wickedly smart with a dry, cutting humor that matched Ryan's wit blow for blow. She quoted Shakespeare and trash-talked pharmaceutical competitors in the same breath. She asked him questions that no one ever asked him about why he became a paramedic, what he felt in those moments between life and death, whether he believed people had a specific time to die or whether fate could be wrestled into submission. "I think fate is lazy," Ryan said, twirling his wine glass. "It throws things at you and waits to see if you duck. The trick is to catch what it throws and throw it back harder." Victoria tilted her head, studying him. "That's either profound or reckless. Why can't it be both? Most people your age don't talk like this. Most people my age haven't held a dying stranger and begged them to breathe." He held her gaze. "Most people my age haven't held you." The air between them changed. Thickened. Victoria set down her fork slowly, and Ryan could see the war happening behind her eyes, the pull toward him fighting against something deeper, something frightened. "Ryan," she said softly, "there are things about me you don't know." "Then tell me." "I can't. Not yet." "Because of whoever you were afraid of that night? The he you asked about?" Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to respond, and that's when the terrace doors burst open and a man walked out. He was tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and he radiated the kind of controlled menace that made every muscle in Ryan's body tense. Behind him stood two of the black-suited security men from the hospital. "Victoria," the man said smoothly, not even glancing at Ryan. "We need to talk." Victoria stood, and for the first time, Ryan saw something he recognized from that rainy sidewalk: fear. Real, visceral fear. "Dominic," she said. "You weren't invited. Since when do I need an invitation?" Dominic's eyes finally slid to Ryan, and they were cold. Appraising. Dismissive. "Who is this?" "The ambulance driver?" "Paramedic, actually," Ryan said, standing. "And you are?" "Dominic Ashford." The man smiled like a blade. "Victoria's brother-in-law. And the person who's going to be running Ashford Industries very, very soon." Now, if you're wondering how one man could threaten to take everything from the most powerful woman in the country, and what this has to do with Victoria being found dying on a sidewalk, drop a comment below telling me what you think Dominic is hiding, and keep watching, because the truth is far darker than anything you can guess. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now so you don't miss any part of what comes next. The story Victoria told Ryan that night, after Dominic left with his threats still hanging in the air like smoke, peeled back a layer of her life that no magazine profile had ever touched. Victoria had been married once. To Dominic's older brother, Edward Ashford, who had been handsome, charming, and, as she discovered 2 years into the marriage, violently controlling. The scar on her collarbone, the one Ryan had noticed in the ambulance? Edward's work. A crystal tumbler, thrown during an argument. Victoria had told the emergency room she'd fallen. She'd told everyone she'd fallen. For 6 years, she'd fallen downstairs, into doors, against countertops, until Edward died in a car accident when she was 36, and Victoria inherited the empire that had been her cage. What she hadn't told anyone, what she was telling Ryan now, sitting in the dark on the terrace with her hands trembling around a glass of water, was that Edward's death wasn't an accident. And Dominic knew it. "I didn't kill him," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I knew about the brake failure. A mechanic, someone Edward had wronged, came to me. Told me what he'd done to the car. And I..." She closed her eyes. "I didn't warn Edward. I let him drive." Ryan sat very still. The lake wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the vast house, a clock chimed midnight. "Dominic has spent 12 years gathering evidence," she continued. "Witness statements, financial records, the mechanic's confession before he died last year. He's been building a case, not for the police, but for the Ashford Industries board. If he can prove I was complicit in Edward's death, the morality clause in the company charter allows the board to strip me of the CEO position and all controlling shares. Dominic is next in the succession line. He gets everything. And the night I found you on the street? Victoria's jaw tightened. Dominic arranged a meeting. Said he wanted to negotiate. I went alone, stupid, I know. We argued. He told me he had the final piece of evidence he needed, that it was over. I tried to leave, and she touched her temple where the wound had been. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up with you breathing into my mouth. Ryan's mind was racing. You think he tried to kill you? I think Dominic realized that if I died before he could execute his boardroom coup, the shares would go into a trust and he'd get nothing. But if I were to die after he'd already initiated proceedings, she let the sentence hang. Then he inherits an empire and buries the investigation into your death because he controls the company that would fund it. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. Victoria, this isn't a corporate dispute. This is attempted murder. You need to go to the police. With what evidence? I woke up on a sidewalk with no memory of how I got there. There are no cameras on that block, I've checked. And Dominic has half the city's political class in his pocket. Her eyes met his, and the vulnerability there hit him harder than anything he'd felt on any emergency call. I've been fighting alone for 12 years, Ryan. I'm tired. He moved closer. Took her hands. They were cold, and he wrapped his around them. Then stop fighting alone. Why do you care? She asked, and there was genuine bewilderment in her voice. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. I'm a damaged woman nearly twice your age with enemies who could destroy you without blinking. Why are you still sitting here? Ryan thought about the question seriously. He thought about the feel of her lips under his when he'd breathed life back into her, the way she'd grabbed his collar like he was the only solid thing in a dissolving world, the sound of her laugh on the same terrace hours ago. Because when you died on that sidewalk, he said quietly, I felt something break inside me at the thought of losing you. And you were a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, and he felt her tremble. Whatever you're carrying, I can help carry it. That's what I do. I show up when people stop breathing, and I don't leave until they're okay. A tear slid down Victoria's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. You can't save everyone, Ryan. Watch me. If that moment just gave you chills, you're not alone. This story is about to get even more intense. Hit that like button if you're feeling this connection between them, and share this video with someone who believes in love that defies all odds. Trust me, you're going to want someone to talk about this ending with. Over the next 3 weeks, something extraordinary happened. Ryan Carter, a paramedic making $42,000 a year, and Victoria Ashford, the most powerful businesswoman in the hemisphere, became inseparable. They met in secret. Victoria's security team couldn't be fully trusted, since Dominic had planted loyalists among them at Ryan's tiny apartment, at diners on the south side, in the back corner of a jazz bar in Pilsen where no one knew either of their names. They argued about everything. Politics. Music. Whether deep dish pizza was actually pizza. Ryan made her laugh until her stomach hurt, and Victoria challenged his mind in ways that left him lying awake at night, replaying her words. She texted him articles about emergency medicine innovations at 3 in the morning. He left annotated copies of novels on her doorstep with sarcastic margin notes. You wrote this character is an idiot on page 47 of Anna Karenina, Victoria said one evening, sitting cross-legged on his apartment floor, wearing his oversized hoodie because her designer clothes were at the dry cleaners. She looked absurdly beautiful in the dim light, her hair loose around her shoulders, reading glasses perched on her nose. That character is an idiot, Ryan said from the kitchen, where he was attempting to cook risotto with questionable results. He had everything and threw it away because of pride. That's not tragic, that's just stupid. It's Tolstoy. Tolstoy was also an idiot. brilliant, but an idiot. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Victoria peered at him over her glasses. You're insufferable. And yet you keep showing up at my apartment in my hoodie. It's comfortable. Sure. The hoodie. That's why you're here. Their eyes met across the small room, and the playful energy shifted into something electric. Victoria stood slowly. Ryan set down the wooden spoon. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and stood before him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and devastating, and see the rapid pulse at her throat. This is complicated, she murmured. Everything worth having is. People will talk. The age difference. Your career. My enemies. It will be. He kissed her. Not like the CPR on the sidewalk, not mechanical, not desperate. This was slow and deliberate and full of everything they'd been circling around for weeks. His hands slid into her hair. Her fingers gripped the front of his shirt. And when they finally pulled apart, breathless and wide-eyed, Victoria whispered, "Oh. That's inconvenient." Ryan laughed against her lips. The most inconvenient thing that's ever happened to me. And I once delivered a baby in a stalled elevator. You're comparing our first real kiss to delivering a baby? Both involved a lot of screaming and an uncertain outcome. She hit his chest lightly. He caught her hand. Kissed her again. And the risotto burned, and neither of them cared. But even as their connection deepened, Dominic was moving. 2 weeks after the kiss, Victoria received a formal notice from the Ashford Industries board. An emergency meeting had been called. Dominic had filed a motion to invoke the morality clause. He claimed to have irrefutable evidence of Victoria's complicity in Edward Ashford's death, and the board would vote in 30 days. If the vote passed, Victoria would lose everything: the company, the fortune, the legacy she'd spent 12 years building from the ashes of her abusive marriage. She'd be publicly branded as an accomplice to her husband's death. And Dominic, who Ryan had quietly discovered had his own history of financial fraud and intimidation, would take the throne. Worse, Ryan came home from a shift to find his apartment ransacked. Nothing stolen, just destroyed. Clothes shredded. Furniture overturned. And on the bathroom mirror, written in red marker, "Walk away." He didn't walk away. Now let me ask you something, would you walk away? Would you risk everything for someone the world says you shouldn't be with? Tell me in the comments below what you would do, and smash that subscribe button if you're riding with Ryan, because what he does next is going to blow your mind. Ryan called in every favor he'd ever earned. His best friend from college, now a forensic data analyst, agreed to dig into Dominic's financial records. His former mentor, a retired detective named Margaret Chen, started pulling strings with contacts at Chicago PD. And Victoria, emboldened by having someone in her corner for the first time in over a decade, hired a private security firm that answered only to her and began building her own counter case. What they found was staggering. Dominic Ashford hadn't just been building a case against Victoria. He'd been systematically embezzling from Ashford Industries for years, siphoning funds through shell companies into offshore accounts. The total amount was north of $300 million. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The forensic analyst uncovered communications between Dominic and a man named Victor Greaves, the same mechanic who had tampered with Edward's brakes. Communications that predated the tampering by 6 months. Dominic hadn't discovered Victoria's secret. He had engineered it. He had arranged for Edward's car to be sabotaged. He had made sure Victoria knew about it. He had counted on her silence, on the battered wife's desperate hope that the abuse would end, and he had waited 12 years for the perfect moment to weaponize her complicity while hiding his own orchestration of the murder. He killed his own brother, Victoria said, staring at the documents spread across the conference table in her private office. Her face was ashen. He killed Edward and spent 12 years setting me up to take the fall. Ryan stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, steady and grounding. And now we can prove it. The board meeting is in 9 days. Then we have 9 days. They worked around the clock. Victoria's legal team prepared the counter-filing. Ryan coordinated with Margaret Chan, who convinced a sympathetic district attorney to open a preliminary investigation into Dominic's finances. The forensic analyst cracked another layer of encryption on Dominic's communications and found something critical: a recording. Dominic, in his own voice, instructing Victor Greaves on exactly how to sabotage the brakes, and explicitly stating that Victoria must be told, because she won't say anything, she wants him dead as much as we do. It was a trap. A 12-year trap. And Victoria had walked into it exactly as Dominic had planned. But he hadn't planned on Ryan Carter. The night before the board meeting, Dominic made his final move. Victoria's car was run off the road as she drove to Ryan's apartment. The vehicle flipped twice and came to rest upside down in a ditch off Lake Shore Drive. By the time Ryan arrived, breaking every traffic law in Chicago, paramedics were already on scene. Victoria was conscious, bleeding from a gash on her forehead, but alive. She'd been wearing her seatbelt. She'd survived. Ryan pulled her from the ambulance stretcher and held her so tightly she gasped. "I'm okay," she whispered. "You almost weren't." His voice was raw. Broken. "I can't do this again, Victoria. I can't find you dying again." She cupped his face in her hands. Blood was drying on her fingers. "Then let's end this. Tomorrow. If your heart is pounding right now, imagine what happens in that boardroom. This is the moment everything changes. Do not scroll away. And if you're watching this far, you clearly have incredible taste, so tap that like button because you've earned it." The board meeting took place in the Ashford Industries headquarters, a glass and steel tower that dominated the Chicago skyline. 47 board members sat around an enormous mahogany table. Dominic Ashford stood at the head, immaculate in his gray suit, radiating the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice silk over steel, "I bring before this board evidence of a grave moral failing by our current CEO. Evidence that Victoria Ashford knowingly allowed the murder of her husband, my brother, Edward Ashford, and has concealed this truth for over a decade." He presented his case. Witness statements. Financial breadcrumbs. A carefully curated narrative of a cold, calculating woman who would let her husband die to inherit his fortune. The room was silent. Board members exchanged uneasy glances. Then Victoria stood. She was bruised from the previous night's car accident. She moved slowly. But her voice, when she spoke, was steel wrapped in velvet. "Everything Dominic has told you is technically true," she said, and the room went rigid. "I did know about the brakes. I didn't warn Edward. I have carried that guilt every single day for 12 years, and I will carry it for the rest of my life." She paused. But Dominic left out one crucial detail. He left out the fact that he is the one who arranged the sabotage. She laid out the evidence. The communications. The financial trail. The recording. Dominic's voice filled the boardroom, cold and unmistakable, plotting his own brother's death. The room erupted. Dominic lunged across the table toward Victoria, his composure finally shattered, but Ryan was faster. He stepped between them, caught Dominic's arm, and held him back with a grip that years of hauling stretchers and wrestling panicked patients had made iron. "Sit down," Ryan said quietly, and there was something in his eyes that made Dominic obey. Security escorted Dominic from the building. The board voted unanimously to dismiss his motion. Within 72 hours, the district attorney filed charges: embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder. Dominic Ashford was arrested at his penthouse at dawn, still in his silk pajamas, looking utterly bewildered that his perfect plan had collapsed. Victoria held a press conference that afternoon. She stood before cameras and told the world the truth about her marriage, about the abuse, about the impossible choice she'd made and the guilt she'd carried. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't make excuses. She simply told the truth, and then she announced a $200 million foundation for domestic violence survivors, funded from the recovered embezzled assets. Ryan watched the press conference from the back of the room, arms crossed, trying to be invisible. He failed. Victoria caught his eye through the sea of reporters, and she smiled, not her public smile, not her CEO smile, but the real one, the one he'd first seen in his break room when he'd challenged her with her own words. Afterward, in the quiet of her office, with the city glittering below them through floor-to-ceiling windows, Victoria sat on the edge of her desk and looked at Ryan with an expression he couldn't quite read. "So," she said. "You saved my life on a sidewalk, survived threats from a psychopath, helped dismantle a 12-year conspiracy, and didn't even ask for a raise. What exactly do you want, Ryan Carter?" He walked toward her slowly. "I told you what I wanted on day one. Dinner. We've had dinner. Several dinners. I've evolved. Into what?" He stopped in front of her, reached out and tucked a strand of silky black hair behind her ear. "Into someone who wants every dinner. Every morning. Every argument about Tolstoy and every burned risotto and every terrifying, beautiful, complicated day with you. I'm 23 years older than you. You keep mentioning that like it's going to scare me off. Victoria, I literally restarted your heart. You think an age gap is going to be the thing that stops me?" Her eyes glistened. "People will say you're with me for the money. People are idiots. We established this with Tolstoy." She laughed through her tears. "You're impossible. And you're everything." He cradled her face in his hands, and his voice dropped to something tender and fierce. "I didn't fall for a billionaire. I fell for the woman who grabbed my collar in the rain and held on like I was the only real thing in the world. I fell for the woman who reads philosophy at 3 in the morning and laughs at her own jokes and fought like hell to survive when everything was trying to break her. The money is irrelevant. You are extraordinary." Victoria Ashford, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, who had survived abuse and betrayal and attempted murder, pressed her forehead against Ryan's and let herself cry. And then she kissed him, slowly, deliberately, completely, and this time there was no emergency, no desperation, no ticking clock. Just two people choosing each other across every divide that the world said should keep them apart. 6 months later, Ryan still worked as a paramedic. He'd refused Victoria's repeated offers to fund his medical school education until she finally structured it as a merit-based scholarship open to all first responders, which he grudgingly applied for and won on his own qualifications. They lived together at the lakefront estate, where Ryan installed a basketball hoop in the driveway and left his sneakers in the foyer of a house worth $37 million, and Victoria pretended to be annoyed but secretly loved the proof that someone was there, that she wasn't alone in the echoing rooms anymore. He still made her laugh every single day. She still challenged his mind every single night. They argued about books and politics and whose turn it was to choose the movie. He called her Vic in private, which no one else on earth was permitted to do. She called him my paramedic, which made him roll his eyes and grin every time. And sometimes, on rainy nights, when the wind came off the lake and the world felt dark and uncertain, Victoria would reach for Ryan in bed and press her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat, steady and strong. And he would pull her close and whisper, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Breathe." And she would. The truth is, love doesn't care about age or bank accounts or what the world thinks is appropriate. Love is a paramedic who drops to his knees on a rainy sidewalk and fights for a stranger's life. Love is a woman who opens her armored heart to someone who expects nothing from her except honesty. Love is showing up, again and again and again, for the people who make your life worth living. If this story moved you, if it made you believe that extraordinary love can find you in the most ordinary moments, then do 3 things for me right now. First, hit that like button. It takes 1 second and it tells me you want more stories like this. Second, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story that could change your perspective on love and life. Third, and this is the most important one, share this video with one person who needs to hear that it's never too late to be loved exactly as you are. Send it to them right now. You might be surprised how much they need it today. Remember, sometimes the most important person in your life is someone you haven't met yet, waiting on a sidewalk in the rain, needing exactly what only you can give. Never stop showing up. Never stop breathing life into the people around you. And never, ever let the world tell you who you're allowed to love.